Hi everybody, welcome to this video on trade creation. So this is an argument that derives when a country enters or joins a customs union. Remember what a customs union is? It's when member nations agree to trade completely freely between themselves, no tariffs, no embargoes, no quotas between themselves at all, free trade, but they decide to impose common external trade barriers on all imports coming in from non-member nations. And normally that common external barrier is a common external tariff. Right, so this is a theory that derives from a country's membership of a customs union. This is a very important definition of trade creation. It is the movement from a high-cost domestic producer to a low-cost producer within the customs union. The best way to look at trade creation is to look at a diagram of it. So what I've drawn here is the French market, and you can assume, let's say it's a French market for vacuum cleaners. Let's make that assumption. We have a domestic supply, a French supply, and a French demand. And we're going to assume for this example that the UK is outside the EU. Remember, the EU is our go-to example of the customs union. Let's assume the UK is outside it. So initially, for France to import items from the UK suffers from this common external tariff. For UK exports, there is this tariff that is charged for France to import those products. So we start off with this higher price of PUK plus tariff. The UK, we're assuming, is the country with the comparative advantage, but with this tariff lumped on top, domestic French supply is at Q1, and French demand is at Q2 initially because of this common external tariff that France, as a member of the EU, must impose on UK vacuum cleaners. So the difference between Q1 and Q2 are the imports coming into France from the UK. But as soon as the UK joins the EU, or any country joins the EU, all tariffs between member nations gone. Complete free trade between member nations. On this diagram, let's assume the UK joins the customs union. What happens? The tariff goes away, the UK supply shifts downwards. So this is basically the tariff diagram, but in reverse, going from a tariff to free trade with the UK, because now we're assuming the UK is a member nation of the EU. So what does that do to our quantities on the axis? Well, now with this lower price, because the tariff goes away from PUK plus T to PUK, there is an extension of demand in France, and there is a contraction of domestic supply in France. So domestic supply contracts to Q3, domestic French demand extends to Q4. So French consumers like this a lot. They benefit from a gain of consumer surplus. You need to have watched my tariff diagram to understand the kind of bits I'm going to shade in here, but these are pretty obvious if you understand the tariff diagram. So here now, this little triangle is now a gain. Right? It's a gain of consumer surplus as more consumers benefit from lower prices. What we also have is a contraction of French supply. So domestic French supply reduces from Q1 to Q3. And because French suppliers are no longer producing these units inefficiently, they're going back to the more efficient UK supplier who have the comparative advantage. This now represents a gain of world efficiency. Okay, so whereas before these two areas were losses, they're now gains. Okay, the middle box is a loss of revenue, but we're not too concerned about that. These are the underlying impacts. What happens to imports now? Well, France is now willing to import far more from the UK. The excess demand is now Q3, Q4 units. That is the quantity level of imports coming into France from the UK as a result of this tariff being abolished, because the UK is now part of the customs union. So, where is this definition on the diagram? Well, initially, French suppliers were producing quite a high level of quantity in the market, up to Q1 in the market. But they were producing between Q1 and Q3 units inefficiently. So now you can see, as a result of the UK joining the customs union and there being free trade, there is a movement from a high-cost domestic producer, which is France in this case, to now a low-cost producer within the customs union, which is now the UK. And that's the movement. That's an efficient movement as well. Why is it called trade creation? Well, because trade has been created, right? So the UK now is completely opened up a new market. They can supply, okay, yes, they can supply to France here, so the amount they can sell to France has increased. But this is true for all member nations within the customs union. So supposing the UK has just joined the customs union, it can now sell vacuum cleaners, yes, to France, but to all other member nations too. So a massive increase in market size for the UK. Trade has been created for this new member, definitely so. And that's a huge boon, but it works two ways. So this is just the market for vacuum cleaners. It looks like French producers are suffering here, and the French economy now importing loads from the UK. But remember, this is just one market. France now can export in great quantities without tariff pressures and tariff barriers. Whatever goods and services it has a comparative advantage in, to the UK. So without trying to stereotype too much, I apologise, but like wine and cheese, for example, it can sell in huge quantities without tariffs to the UK. All other EU member nations can sell to the UK without tariffs on their goods and services. So trade is created between all member nations when a country joins the customs union as a result of the loss of tariff. More generally, when a country joins a customs union, because of the free trade between all these big member states, there are 27 nations in the EU, that's a huge market of 5 million consumers. There are huge benefits of free trade that occur. All the benefits I've talked about in my previous video, the gains from free trade, occur, like economies of scale benefits for domestic producers now who have got a greater market access, greater export potential. Things like greater technological transfer that can take place. Things like lower prices for consumers, greater consumer surplus. All these benefits that can accrue as a result of a country joining a customs union. So that is a diagram. It really is a very, very simple diagram, just the removal of a tariff and the opposite effects that we're used to with the tariff diagram. Then you're good to go with trade creation. So I hope this makes sense. Great to use in an essay, looks really good. So learn it well, use it well, smash your exam. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.